What I want to do first, though, is really just jump right in and give an introduction to my work, which, as you've seen, is rooted in a view of experience that I call real experience. So first of all, I want to explain, of course, what I mean then by real experience. And to do so, I'm going to explore our sort of current dominant mode of thought and related methods pertaining to how we perceive, know, and act on health, disease, and illness and its experience. A dominant mode of thought that I call the intellectual analytical. So let me first, I'm going to share some slides. Okay. All right. So let's take this sort of blue circle here as a representation of whole actual living or lived experience of an individual person, not just of their health. Now, in an intellectual analytical view, it sort of first perceives health as an object, as a separate domain to whole lived experience. And typically it splits health into separate physical and mental domains from there. Then when there's a problem with health, whether physical or mental, there's a further abstraction or removal in the form of a distinct problem, whether a disease, condition, illness, or a symptom of them. The object of concern and inquiry is separated from an idea of normal health and from living experience. Our gaze is in effect 3 times removed from the actual experience of individual persons. So with a distinct abstracted object of inquiry now defined and held in our observation, a sort of material pop-out from experience, we proceed then to use symbols and variables to record, analyze, measure, and quantify the matter of concern. We fix it in our gaze and in time to determine its properties of size, scale, and severity, amongst others, to tell us what it is and what we should do about it. We then diagnose it, label it to create shared meaning, and decide whether and how to act to deal with it. And then we use the same methods to assess the effect of any new or existing intervention on the properties of the object of the problem. We apply logic, reason, and mathematics with standards, outcomes, endpoints, and score systems to reduce the correlations, comparisons, and predictions we need to inform our valuations, our choices, and our actions in practice. So this dominant mode of abstract intellectual analytical thought fixes in time discrete parts of whole experience in an objectified model of health, functioning, and being. And whilst this mode of thought has produced huge medical advances in the 21st century, my position is that on its own, it's no longer enough. As the human condition becomes more complex, chronic, suffering from anxiety, entangled with nature, especially in climate change, and also more than human in its embeddedness with data and personal technologies, I argue we need to augment analytical knowledge with deeper insight into concrete real experience. So what then is real experience, and how do we do that? So first, real experience is not just the outward looking horizon of sense experience, the 5 senses and what they sense, but the more inner experience of sensations, feelings, states, and thoughts. And so in this perspective, we fold in health, whether mental and physical, and any problems of disease and illness into interior real experience itself. Second, real experience is always becoming or flowing. By flow, I mean that time in experience is ceaselessly passing and also irreversible. The future is always on its way to the present, and the present moment is always slipping into the past, just like then. So in real experience, then, nothing is stable or stays the same. Real experience is dynamic and never repeated. No 2 feelings are the same. Third, real experience is not a quantity of some sensation up and down a scale, but a qualitative multiplicity of interpenetrating, overlapping, progressing sensations. Like the notes forming a melody in a song, we don't hear just a single note, We hear notes in their interrelation or togetherness forming a whole as the song passes. So when we experience chronic pain, for example, we don't just experience a singular self-similar sensation of pain in its totality, and that is often represented by a quantity or a score. Rather, we feel an interpenetrating set of progressing sensations or affects whose experience is shaped not only by memory of past experiences, but also by where we are, what we need or would like to do, by our perception of what's possible, by the understanding or lack of our partners and friends, by the weather or the potential weather, and so on, entangled in relations of forces producing different interpenetrating sensations. We also may experience a sense of injustice or inequality entangled with these sensations too. Now, fourth, real experience is interactionally created. It's not produced in the brain as mind or computer, separate from our encounters in the world. Rather, it's created, enriched, and diminished via our interactions, encounters, and events that we have in our world. Excuse the aeroplane, I'm just going right over. There is an event in my experience of presenting this review. So, and then finally, fifth, we can consider how there are similar, often chronic, real experiences shared by many people in the world. They include real experiences with bodily diseases such as pain, mental health real experiences such as depression, and more social kind of dis-ease experiences such as loneliness. And any single context such as these can share certain origins, forces, conditions, and capacities, as well as observable consequences. Now, the problem is that all these 5 essential dimensions of real experience, interiority, flow, qualitative progression, interactional creation, and a reality of collective flows, they kind of escape our dominant empirical intellectual analytical mode. Dynamics, movement, and flow are evacuated by analytical knowledge. We hold experiences stable and therefore miss the unstable flowing nature of actual reality. Our tendencies of thought and method then suppress thought of and access to the real, and they lead to only a superficial knowing of experience. Our gaze does not see the continuous flows of multiplicities of sensations, feelings, and thoughts forming concrete and often similar real experiences in our world. So to define an alternative radical empiricism of real experience with health and wider domains too, we must start with a model of real experience, one as a dynamic, interior, continuous becoming interactional creation, at the center of which are the core, the generative material of experience, the sensations or affects we have, as well as the capacities we desire to affect and be affected to enjoy the valued real experiences we seek. So I organize these affects and capacities into 4 domains: social, cultural, material, spatial, bodily, motor, or the movement of the body, and perceptual, cognitive. Now our phenomena of interest is firmly centered on real experience and its dynamic creation, its differentiation too in different types of interactions. And in this, we can now set a wider frame and a more substantive model of health as a power or capacity to enter into the interactions and encounters that create and sustain the experiences that we value. A substantive model of health within real experience defined as a whole affective capacity or power for creating these different elements forming desired, valued, and meaningful real experiences shown in the box here. More of a developmental model of health that goes way beyond the more normal, functional, essential view of normal health. So here is a framing of an experience ecosystem around these flows and around what typically a context of a particular real experience. So this loose open frame I call a focal real experience environment. It's a cutout of flowing reality that includes human actors and all their experiences, practices and technologies, non-human forces, social determinants within this, and also tendencies of thought, practice, and action that together impact upon the focal context of real experience in different ways. An experience ecosystem then is a new way to see health systems and also markets for value creation. Using one, we ask not just what are the differences or the inequalities of health or illness, but also questions of their content, formation, differentiation, and repetition. We can do this for a chosen context of real experience with health within a particular type of place or community, group, setting, or population. For example, in my work in teaching, we've explored the experience ecosystem of chronic pain in Northern Ireland, of perioperative surgical stress in hospitals in Europe, of workplace well-being in Germany, and of all actor experiences of safety provision in acute care settings. And I can talk more about these examples in our discussion later. Now, for any focal context of real experience, such as chronic pain, I define poles of the most positive and negative qualities, capacities, and desires of that real experience. And using these, we can then research and discover the current distribution and movements of experience for a focal context. We do that through the lens of what is called an assemblage. An assemblage is kind of like a machine that produces and differentiates real experiences. Greater than the sum of its parts of social determinants, human and non-human actors, events, affects, capacities, and material objects, and things like devices, drugs, and digital technologies. An assemblage forms a particular enduring quality, content, and expression of real experience within a single context, like chronic pain. So for any focal context, we can define an assemblage of assemblages of real experience that exist around the poles of positive and negative experience. There are assemblages of qualities and capacities of experience on a line of deterioration to the negative pole, and assemblages on a line of recovery to the positive pole. So in this diagram, this is an assemblage of assemblages for chronic pain real experience in Northern Ireland. This shows 6 contingent assemblages of different experience qualities, capacities, and their transitions. And the numbers in the population, the 400,000 people that suffer from chronic pain in Northern Ireland, the numbers in the population belonging to each assemblage. Now note here how we lose the distinction between prevention and care. The assemblages flow in a complete system of experience creation and differentiation for any given context, like chronic pain. So with the core models of real experience ecosystems, and assemblages defined, which I've briefly shown you here, I've developed an entire end-to-end learning and design process for pursuing an ongoing transitional purpose in any context or place. A fully worked example of which can be found in my book, and I can explain the process later in today's talk. This consists of a series of templates linking to a process of learning, design, creation towards real impact in any context of real experience. So to conclude, in today's sort of hyper-attention achievement society, characterized by a scattered perception amidst an excess of stimuli, of a rapid switching of focus to different tasks, of kind of constant neural connections with our devices, I think of a sense of sort of never standing still and time running away from us, and also for many of us of a real sense of inequality. And where in health too, we have this seeming sort of pressing will and obligation to be healthy and well, where we're compelled to track and quantify our activities, really, I think, without sufficient reflection and contemplation. In this sort of late modern world shaped by intellectual analytical modes of thinking and design, I argue we need a revolution in thought, method, and design. One that starts and ends with real experience, and that's practiced via the wider frame of experience ecosystems and assemblages of their creation. One that sees our current predicaments such as depression, anxiety, ADHD, and burnout as the result of the systemic level breakdown of flows of real experience. One that cultivates a special mode of extended perception or method of intuition into affects, feelings, flows, differences, and transitions alongside science and rational knowing. And that kind of values this flow intuition as a valued means to see, understand, and respond to our largely unobservable real experiences in the world. A shift of attention that takes place within a more substantive framing and account of health as a power or capacity to be, do, and become, not a view of health that is largely functional, utilitarian, and essential, of one supporting a life of minimum effort, of convenience, and of least action. A more transcendental empiricism that enriches us with much more deeper insight into the intensive conditions and sedimentations of real experience, one that seeks to make contact with the vitality, creativity, and duration of life itself through novelty and invention in design and interaction. And fundamentally, a process that makes contact with and helps us to create the flows of real experience that we desire, along with the organizations, capabilities, services, and technologies that are necessary to enact them repeatedly, sustainably, and, as I said in the film, if you've seen that, with real impact. So that's my introduction to real experience and what I call the real experience revolution, found in a new radical empiricism of health in its wider context of real experience. So there we go.